So just in the last couple of months, you had a big milestone. You raised $5 billion in equity at a $134 billion valuation. We have we're kind of lucky because we have an opportunity to talk to you as you're making decisions, and maybe you've already made them, about how to allocate this, big windfall, if you will. Can you walk us through, and you named several things that you want to do, that you would plan to do with that. There was giving employees exits. There's development of your products. You mentioned Lakebase in particular, which is your database purpose-built for AI. Accelerate Genie, your conversational AI that lets people have conversations with their data. You mentioned AI research, a handful of other things. Tell us about draw us a mental picture of how you're thinking about prioritizing that important milestone, $5 billion.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for having me. Excited to be here. We're just seeing acceleration in all of our business. I really mean it. We see acceleration in our core business. And by the way, we're like, why is it? Why are we seeing acceleration in the business? We slice it by Europe, by United States, by Latin America, Asia, everything accelerating. We slice it by different clouds. No matter how we look at it, it's just, the business is growing. So that requires you to invest, to keep up. So we're investing in the core business. So that's the data platform, the security, and all of that. So that's the huge investments going in there. On the AI side, I think that the biggest, and maybe we'll get into it later, is that I think the biggest opportunities, I think AGI is here. So I think we don't need more intelligence. We need context for the AI. The AIs without context are useless. So that's our Genie product. So there's a big research team that just does research on reinforcement learning and advanced AI techniques to make that better.
How many researchers will you add?
We're hiring hundreds, and they're very expensive. So it's almost like thousands. It feels like it, other employees that you would otherwise hire. And then they need GPUs. So there's a lot of investment goes into that. So we're very excited about that. Happy to talk about that. That's the thing I'm most excited about. And then we're getting into new markets, because what's happening basically is that the thing that people call SaaS apocalypse. People interpret that in extremes, but really what's happening is that the barriers to entry for other people to come in and compete in any business in software is just lowered. So we're getting into new markets as well. So
talk about what that looks like. What new markets? Where?
Yeah, we launched LakeWatch, which brings us into the security market. And the security market is itself going through a big revolution, because what's happening is that, we all heard it with Mythos, but actually it started before Mythos. It's already the case that the number one attacker, according to HackerOne's top list, is this person called Expo. But if you look behind it, it's actually all automated agents, and it's been dominating charts. Even before Mythos, they found they used OpenAI's O3 model to hack the kernel of Linux. So this has been going on. So there's an onslaught of agents coming, attacking these businesses. So cyber is a big risk. And the existing businesses that do security protection, they're sort of in this legacy model where you have to ingest certain data. It's very expensive. They're not going to be able to keep up with the agents. So, we got into that market. Now, maybe we would have gone into that market anyway, but with AI, it's compressing almost 10x the time it takes for us to build that.
It's making it a lot easier for you to come in and try to disrupt. Okay.
Yeah, for multiple reasons, right? Writing that software is 10 times faster now, thanks to AI. So we can just produce the competing software very quickly. We could not have done that 5 years ago if it wasn't for AI. So that's one. But the second is that the AI threats themselves have changed the landscape. So the way the incumbents were actually approaching security, you need to change those assumptions. So that also always opens up an entry point for the existing. And then thirdly, it's not specific to this time, we don't have any security business, so we don't have an innovator's dilemma. We don't have to protect some revenue. We can just launch something, and we can, it's sort of your margin is my opportunity, as Bezos used to say.
Do you have a target for the number of people? Because you're going to have to hire researchers, engineers. You're going to have to build up your capability in that area. You can't just rely on agents and Mythos.
No, we've staffed up the whole team. We built up a whole team.
How big do you envision that becoming?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be in the hundreds. But the way you want to operate in this AI era is actually a very small team that can move very fast. Is actually preferable. So actually, so if it was 1,000, it would be a terrible answer. We would go nowhere. I think it's going to get to the hundreds. But you want to keep it small and fast and nimble and execute quickly. Because in this AI era, big teams slow you down because it requires coordination between lots of people. And that then becomes the actually slowest or lowest common denominator for progress. You want to unleash the agents and let them go fast.
You've talked very eloquently about how the idea that many businesses over-indexed early on chatbots. We sort of went a little nuts on that.
Yeah.
You've obviously thrown you've thrown yourself your resources behind this age of agentic AI. Curious about how we protect against the downsides. Harvard Business School put out some research that talked about how agentic AI, particularly when we humanize it, can result in shifting accountability away from individuals, reducing review quality, eroding trust. They talk about brain fry. I mean, it's a little bit of a doomsday scenario, but how do we protect against that? How do we avoid the risk of over-indexing on agentic AI?
Buy our new security product, LakeWatch. No, just kidding. But actually, only half kidding. These things are now merging, right?
Yeah.
So we were a data and AI company. We were focused on data and AI. We were not doing security before. And people would tell us, like, oh, make sure that no one breaks into the data, and make sure that the data and the AI is. But now people are saying, hey, how do we know that the agents are also not doing something weird? So actually, whole markets are collapsing. So us getting into security is not just happenstance. That market is kind of collapsing with the data and AI market that we used to be in itself. So all those things that they say is absolutely true. So, you unleash the agents. Well, should the agents act on behalf of you? How do you know that they're not going to do something that they're not supposed to do? So, I think that ultimately, this is why I think actually humans are going to continue to be in the loop for a very long time. A lot of people talk about, like, AI disruption is going to, displace jobs, 20% unemployment, so on. I actually think it's not at all the case. I think that we need to be firmly in the loop because we need accountability, to your point. So we're going to ask, if you go to the doctor and they say that, we have to amputate your arm, you want to know who, like, if that was a mistake, who approved it? Oh, some agents, sorry.
Sam.
It's like, oh, well, I lost my arm. Like, that's not cool. So, so I do think that there needs to be like, okay, well, it was actually signed by this doctor. Right. Did they look through the result? Did they look at their traces? Did they understand what was going on? Why did they sign off on this? Same thing with our kids. We send them to school. We don't want like, they were trained in the wrong stuff, and now your kid just went crazy because some agent taught it that. Okay, I'm okay with that. No. We want to know who was the teacher, who was the person in the room, why didn't I oversee this, why didn't they? So I think we're going to have humans in the loop, and we need to have this, and it comes also oftentimes down to the legal issue of, who took the legal risk here. So this is going to continue. One way to think about this is just to look at the past.
Yeah.
We could solve self-driving kind of airplanes a long time ago. But if I told you all that I'm going to give you like a huge discount, 90% discount, and you can go with Ali's airline, we just have one slightly drunk pilot that only has like 50 hours of flying experience, but it's really cheap. None of you would get on it. You would say, oh, that's terrifying. But we already have these autopilots in the planes. So why do we still want humans in the plane? Because we still want someone to sit there, and we don't want to just delegate everything to the sort of bots
to
take over. So yeah, I think that, and that's one of the focus areas with our security product.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's solved, by the way. I was joking when I said just buy our product and it will solve itself. This is going to be a journey we go through together as humanity, as AI comes and permeates society.
Yeah.
Just like when internet came and there was all these, Nigeria letters and fraud and all of those kind of things, we learned how to deal with it, and we figured out how to handle payments. I was a kid in college, and they were saying no one's going to ever swipe a credit card online because that could just disappear, and they could. Now we only shop things using.
Sure.
So we figure out techniques to deal with it. We'll have to go through that together.
I want to talk about numbers a little bit. Bloomberg in a Bloomberg. You talked in February about your ARR being at about 5.4 billion for Q4. We're well past Q1. Can you update that for us and give us a sense of kind of where the ARR is now?
Yeah, my finance team would kill me if I do that live.
Yeah, but this isn't a quiet. There's no quiet period when you're a private company, and you have no plans to IPO, as you told my colleagues.
This is what
today.
I keep telling my finance team, but they still give me a hard time after these meetings. So let's just say that's significant acceleration that we never would have thought we would have.
Acceleration from the 65% YOY
Definitely.
increase. So it was faster than 65%
Definitely.
in Q1 over the year earlier.
Yes, I can reveal that much. And you already got me into trouble. And I can tell you that...
You're welcome.
Yeah. And also, I can say this, it's also when you look at by different product lines,
right,
or by different regions, or we have many of the AI companies are our customers. Like OpenAI has shared that they're a customer of Databricks. They use Databricks to 800 million users to make sure that they're nothing crazy is going on. They use us for that, so it's back to the kind of safety thing that we discussed. But you say, okay, well, what if we remove some of maybe it's just a few big AI companies that are using us. Anthropic, use Databricks. If we remove those, still the same thing, acceleration in the whole business. So why is that? Why is the business accelerating so much? I think one of the main reasons, and this is maybe one thing that people are not sort of thinking through, which is the agents are now starting to behave, they're starting to actually act throughout the ecosystem. So a month and a half ago, I shared that we've now seen more queries come to Databricks by agents than we see by humans. So it's like this tipping point where, it was 100% humans, I would say, 3 years ago. And now we already have over 50%. Databases launched on Databricks. Yeah. It's over 81% now agents. And these agents are just way faster. So they just launch lots of stuff. We're a consumption-based pricing model. Our revenue goes up when that happens. Yeah. So that's one of the main drivers behind this.
You have a lot of visibility into which LLMs engineers, programmers are using. You talked in the past about how engineers will just switch LLMs very, very quickly. And they're becoming better, and we're creating more tools that enable them to do that. And we're able to measure kind of, well, who's using which. What have you observed over the last 6 months? What has surprised you in terms of LLM use, and who's ascendant? Which ones are ascendant right now?
Well, I mean, without picking, they're all partners and customers of ours, so I have to be careful. You keep getting me into trouble here, but
it's my job.
Yeah, great job. But I would just say this: that the biggest shocker for me is that it used to be that GPT-4 comes out, it could dominate for 6 months or so on, and then just not long ago, the saying was that frontier models only last 3 months, a quarter. So even if you have the world's best AI model, it'll only last a quarter. Okay, that's kind of surprising. So the most shocking thing now is that number is now 1 month. Like, you get to write for 1 month. Yeah. Like, maybe I should say, like, when Gemini came out November last year from Google, it was like everybody was blown away. Everybody switched to Gemini, But that's right now, people are not talking about Gemini, right?
Who are they talking about?
Well, I mean, like, people are, okay, you're very good at your job. Look, people are very excited about Codex, but people are also very excited about Claude. And I think Gemini 3.5, when it comes, people are going to be very excited about that too. Here's so number one was this shrinking time of how long a model. In some sense, this question even won't matter soon. What was the hottest model yesterday? What is it today? Well, who cares? Tomorrow is a new day. But the fact that this shrunk was interesting. The second thing that's really been a big surprise for me is that it used to be that the developers are changing models because they want the latest model. The models just speak English or any other natural language, so it's very easy to switch between them. You don't need to worry about, oh, I'm changing everything. No, it's just, it's a probabilistic thing. Every time the answer is different anyway, so you might as well just pick the cheaper, smarter thing that came out just yesterday. But this was developers. Now we're seeing that corporations, IT departments, leadership is freaking out about the costs.
Costs.
And they're saying this is insane. Because, when you see these companies, get $30 billion of revenue just in 1 quarter out of nowhere, well, someone's paying for that. So on the other side, they're freaking out that, how do we put cost controls in place?
Right.
So one thing that has a new trend that has emerged. So we put this thing out. It's called the Unity AI Gateway, which lets you basically, it's a kind of we did it for security reasons, because back to our security. We said, look, you need to control which AIs your company is using.
Yes.
That was our purpose. Like, to make sure they're not using some model you don't want, to track the data, did they swipe a credit card? But what the main thing people are using it for is actually, can I put a budget on it? And the thing they're doing is they're using more and more open source models.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're using this new paradigm that's called the advisor model. So you use a small, not so intelligent, very cheap, very fast open source model. And then you give it a tool, because these AIs are very good at using tools. They can go type stuff and they could go into a word processor. The tool you give them is access to a smart big model with a big brain. And you say, hey, when you get stuck, use the smarter model. And this way, people were on this exponential increase in costs,
right.
And they're able to completely flatten it. Even though usage is increasing, cost is flattening.
To the extent that cost is an issue, and to the extent that you have visibility into the popularity of Chinese-based models, which on a per-use basis are relatively cheaper than those in the US, are you seeing people gravitate toward that, especially as they become more price sensitive?
People don't want to talk about it. Okay, but yes, absolutely. As Chinese models, open source models are absolutely dominating. And
when people have the choice to use them.
Yeah, it's like, hey, would you want to pay $30 million or $1 million? Well, you have to use this Chinese model. Okay, fine.
Right.
It's like, it might be like, oh, I don't want to use a Chinese model, and we have concerns and so on. And it's like, well, it's going to cost $30 million versus $1 million. It's like, okay, I take that.
What does that say about the efforts that the U.S. has led globally to sort of hamstring Chinese ability to advance in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean,
has it been effective?
Well, I mean, open source is just this force.
Right.
You can't fight it. It's just, and these are like, you put the weights out there and the whole world starts using it. By the way, it starts reappearing. So for instance, Cursor put out the model, Composer. Well, it became clear that they actually trained Composer on top of a Chinese model. Right. So Composer would not have been able to be trained without Kimi model that came out of China. So there's also this happening. So then some of our customers are like, we do not want to use a Chinese model. We're OK using Composer. I was like, OK, here you go. So I do think that in the end of the day, it's kind of like money talks.
Sure. Speaking of money, earlier today you were on Bloomberg Television, and they stole my thunder by asking you the IPO question. And you said something that was maybe a little controversial about this being a terrible year for an IPO. Don't tell Elon or Dario or Sam. When is a good year? When is a good time? What are the ingredients needed for you to say this is a great time?
Yeah, look, I just think that if you have like big dislocations happening and there's big things happening, election year, there's macroeconomic indicators that who could be great, could not be great. We don't know right now. There is uncertainty, with energy and other things going on in the world. And then there's these mega IPOs, and no one's ever raised that much money that any one of them. The amount that they're raising in the IPO has never been raised ever by any company before. So I think it's better to wait and see. And and maybe I'm wrong actually, and it'll be a great year. But I don't lose anything by waiting. It can go later, and go at the time where you just have more stability. Like as everyone knows, businesses prefer predictability and no big surprises. No surprises is good.
Do you think that you'll need to go out and raise again before an IPO, given 2026, you seem to be putting that off the list?
We might raise again. I think that there's going to be much more interest after these 3 gigantic private companies go public. The way it works is that private capital people who have to invest in private companies, they can't deploy it in public stocks, right? So I think there's just going to be a bigger supply in the private markets for companies like Databricks, Stripe, others. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of capital for us.